Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9, The Bigger Picture. It was 1942, and off the coast of Newfoundland, a badly damaged American Navy ship was going down. Among the panic-stricken crew was the Lanier Phillips, an African-American sailor who grew up in the racially torn South. A man whose grandmother once told him, "Never look a white man in the eye." But this disaster and the events that followed would change his life forever and connect him to a place he would never forget. Paul Johnson tonight with the story.
For an 87-year-old American from the Deep South, Lanier Phillips spends a lot of time thinking about a tiny community in Newfoundland.
And I think about it, I dream about it, it's there, it's cemented in my soul and etched in my mind.
On a nice day, St. Lawrence is postcard perfect, a vision of maritime beauty on the rugged Burin Peninsula. But when the weather turns, it can be deadly. That's what happened on the morning of February 18th, 1942, when the U.S. Navy suffered one of its worst accidents ever. Two ships ran aground, leaving more than 200 dead.
I dream of going through the whole thing all over again, many times. A lot of times I wake up on the floor, rather than fell out of the bed, thinking I was diving off the ship into the water to get on the raft.
Only days earlier, 3 ships had left Boston to join the Second World War. Lanier was aboard the USS Truxton, an old destroyer assigned to escort duty in the North Atlantic. The Truxton was sent to confront deadly German U-boats waging a campaign of terror. But 2 of the ships, the Truxton and the Pollux, sailed into one of the worst storms in years. Bound for a refueling station in Iceland, they veered off course, right into the unforgiving arms of Canada's rocky east coast. Meanwhile, the people of St. Lawrence were waking up to a disaster right in their backyard.
Try to imagine what this must have been like here on the coast of Newfoundland in February in a terrible storm, with hundreds of sailors out there in that water clinging to the wreckage of their ship. Meantime, the townspeople of St. Lawrence were coming down these cliffs here, trying to get to the sailors to rescue them.
Levi Pike was one of those rescuers. When he looks out over those cliffs, the memories come flooding back.
We got over to looking out over the cliff there, over the cove, and I could see, I'd say 20 to 22 men on the wreck then, on the Truxton, just clinging on for dear life, and it was a heartbreaking sight, I'll tell you. See, there was so little we could do.
The terrified Americans jumped into the lifeboats, but the African Americans aboard the Truxton hesitated, fearing a worse fate than drowning waited for them on land. Born in rural Georgia in 1923, Lanier came from a family of sharecroppers, poor farmers who worked rented land and were expected to know their place in the racist, segregated South.
I had never heard a kind word from a white man in my life.
There were few opportunities for African Americans to make a decent living or provide education for their children.
They built a school and the Ku Klux Klan burned the school down. I had no future. I had no prototype to look up to. I never saw a black policeman or anything. I never saw a black doctor.
And many of those who spoke out simply disappeared.
They would come up missing, things like that. They said, well, they lynched him somewhere.
Faced with this brutal reality, Lanier's view of white people growing up isn't surprising.
All I had did was think as a child what I could do to the white man. It just kept growing and growing and growing, the hatred.
So when World War II started, he decided to escape.
When I got 18, I saw this sign, "I want you."
But the U.S. Navy wasn't much better. African American sailors were only allowed to serve as mess attendants, shining shoes and serving food to white sailors, and were forbidden to even get off the ship in some countries like Iceland.
The captain came on the PA system and he said, "Liberty commenced at 1600, but no Negroes are allowed in Iceland. They call us Negroes.
Several terrifying hours later, their ship, now rapidly sinking, the African Americans aboard the Truxton faced a terrible choice.
I remember looking at those cliffs and talking to the other African Americans, and they're saying, we'll be lynched if we go ashore. This is Iceland. Can't you see this is Iceland? Or what? And I said, well, at least we can die fighting, I say, because we're certainly going to die if we don't get on this raft. It was the last raft. And that's when I went overboard on the raft and left them and never seen them again. They all died. The raft capsized just before it got ashore. Water, I guess, was about waist deep, you know. And so we got ashore.
While Lanier passed in and out of consciousness and waited for death to come, the rescuers were having their own problems. Levi Pike was there and remembers the fight to get the men to shore.
Wind was the problem, the wind and the waves. And it was blowing straight into the cove, they might say, straight into Chamber Cove. It was very difficult to handle the people, getting them up over the cliff. It was so little compared to what was needed, you know. But there were so many lost their lives there. So many men, 203 altogether. It was a very sad scene. I'll never forget it as long as I live, for sure.
When it was over, 203 sailors were dead, but the townsfolk saved 186 men, including Lanier Phillips. And for him, the tide was about to turn. Lanier was about to meet someone who would not only save his life, but change it forever.
I can see her. In fact, I can see her right now if I just close my eyes, and I can picture her. And I dream of her often.
Coming up on 16 by 9.
And I looked and saw these white ladies just rain down humanity on me. And it just changed my entire philosophy in life.
That's all coming up. Welcome back to 16 by 9, the bigger picture.
Having watched racial violence most of his life, Lanier Phillips was suspicious of the Canadians who so willingly offered help. But instead of racism, Phillips found a humanity he'd never experienced before. And that inspired him to greatness. Here again is our Paul Johnson.
Rescued from the waves and in shock after the wreck of the USS Truxton on February 18, 1942, Navy sailor Lanier Phillips woke up to a sight he'd never imagined possible.
I heard one of the ladies say, "He's all right, let's clean him up." So they began to bathe me, and the first thing they did was got the tar like out of my eyes so I could open my eyes. And I looked and saw these white ladies bathing me.
Covered in oil that had leaked from the doomed ship, he was terrified about what would happen when these white strangers who rescued him realized he was a black man.
And I said, man, this is the end of me. They're gonna throw me out now. When they get all this oil off me or what. But instead, they began to say nice things.
It was the first time a white person had ever spoken kind words to him.
They began to keep bathing me and feeding me with a spoon and lifting my head. And one of the ladies said, well, I'll take him at my house.
Eli Pike was only 69 years ago, when he first saw Lanier Phillips. This is where his mother, Violet Pike, nursed the wounded sailor back to health, feeding him and keeping him warm.
Well, Mom was always a person that helped people. She was always on the go. Anybody who needed help, she was there right there to give it to them.
Just rained down humanity on me and all, and showed love and kindness. And it just changed my entire philosophy in life. I just felt different, and I feel different today because of that, and it'll be with me until I die.
Lanier Phillips, a man with hate in his heart, began to believe there were people who would look past the color of a man's skin.
I said to myself, why can't everybody be like the people of St. Lawrence? Why is it so much hatred for black people?
And so Lanier decided that He, too, could learn to look past skin color and focus instead on his own true colors.
Had it not been for those people, there wouldn't have been one survivor. And I said to Lanier Phillips, that's the kind of man you should be.
So he became that man, going on to break barriers, becoming the first African-American sonar technician in the U.S. Navy, and fighting for civil rights.
All the way from Selma, Alabama.
Marching in 1965, side by side with Martin Luther King.
Like Dr. King said once, when a child is exposed to racism and hatred, he's wounded in mind and soul for the rest of his life. Well, I was wounded in mind and soul, but the people of St. Lawrence healed that wound. And now I have hatred for no one.
The man with humanity in his soul went on to win many awards, an honorary degree from Memorial University in Newfoundland, and the U.S. Navy's prestigious Lone Sailor Award. But with each new honor, Lanier credits the Canadians who changed his heart.
I know that had it not been for the people of St. Lawrence, there would not have been one survivor.
But fortune has not been so kind to the town that changed the life of this African-American sailor. Its population has been in decline ever since the cod fishery was shut down nearly 20 years ago. And while a lot has changed, one thing hasn't. The folks around here still remember that stormy night 69 years ago, and Mayor Wade Rousel says mostly they remember a man who woke up on the shores of a tiny town in a strange country and received love instead of hate.
People are so inspired by Lanier Phillips' story of greatness. You know, a man who fought for his country, fought for civil rights, and fought for justice for all.
Lanier Phillips has done a great many things in his life, but he has one more he wants to accomplish: to share a message with the men and women in a small Canadian town far away.
Well, to all the people of St. Lawrence, I want to thank you for teaching me such a great lesson. You are a prototype for the rest of the world to capture and to learn love and humanity that you showed for the people. And thank you so much again. I can never thank you enough.
Lanier is 87 years old now and lives in a retirement home. His traveling days are mostly behind him, and it's not easy for him to get back to St. Lawrence, Newfoundland. So 16 by 9 carried his message for him to take Lanier's words to the people whose compassion melted hate away, starting with one of the men who helped rescue him that day, Levi Pike.
Well, to all the people of St. Lawrence, I want to thank you.
Couldn't be a better person. God bless you.
Violet Pike is gone. She passed away 35 years ago.
I think she would really be surprised, and she'd be pretty humbled, you know, to think that people would want to talk about this, you know.
Her son Eli knows if she could hear them, the words of this sailor would swell her heart.
And thank you so much again. I can never thank you enough.
Think your mother would like to see that?
I know she would. She would love to see that. Love to.